Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Samantha Dean.
Good evening. Tonight is the first of a series of 30 weekly programs designed by, for, and about women. It's a series that will consider woman as wife, woman as mother, and woman as a force in society. And in the weeks to come, we will be discussing such problems as menopause, birth control, marital problems, raising children, pursuing careers. In fact, the entire spectrum of what it means to be a woman in today's society. Each week we will have various guests, each of whom has been chosen because he or she is an expert in the field under consideration. The first 10 weeks we will be discussing woman as wife. Tonight our subject is frigidity, and with me are Dr. Gloria Roblyn, who is an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry in the Medical College at the State University of New York at Buffalo, where she coordinates a class in human sexuality. Dr. Stanford Copley is also here. He is an obstetrician and gynecologist. He's also on the faculty of the University of Buffalo in the medical school. We also have Dr. Robert Seidenberg, a practicing psychoanalyst in Syracuse, New York, and he is president of the Western New York Psychoanalytical Society. A few minutes ago, we were discussing the word frigidity, and you said, Dr. Roblyn, in fact you all said, that you object to the term frigidity. Would you care to elaborate a little bit on this?
Well, we see the term as really not meaningful. I think, as I said, a rose is a rose is a rose, and there it is. But frigidity has a wide scale of semantic connotation. It's a denigratory, depressing term. It's accusatory, and it really doesn't define anything. And it particularly offends me because a woman may have the term frigidity applied to her because she doesn't have an orgastic response that's called for, and yet she may have lived happily in marital relations with her husband for many years, had great pleasure in her relationship with him. They both might be satisfied, and now she can have a label pinned on her that's totally inaccurate.
Well, what would you prefer as an alternative?
I don't think you need a label or a term for that. I think you have to focus on sexual functioning rather than labeling people as those who cannot function.
Dr. Seidenberg, as a therapist, would you put a label on this, or what would be your definition of the word frigidity?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with much of what Gloria says on the subject, and I'd go a little further and indicate that it really is one of the terms that has come out of sexism in our society, that it's another put down. It's something like the word, the opposite of frigidity, something like nymphomania, which has no equivalency for men, and it's a sort of...
Wasn't satyriasis an equivalent for that?
Yes, but who knows about that?
Oh, okay.
Let's not get too technical. Dr. Copley, is frigidity mainly psychological, or are there physiological overtones as well?
Well, I would like to say before we start that I agree with the other two panelists here that frigidity is something that is a great problem because it has been called a problem, and in reality I don't believe I've ever met a woman in my practice who is actually frigid, although I've met many who have thought they were frigid. So consequently it's a state of mind that has been labeled by many people that doesn't actually exist. Many women are sexually responsive in many ways and yet are thought to be frigid because they don't respond in the traditional way that is expected from them by certain magazines, articles, books. So as far as I'm concerned, I feel we shouldn't use the term frigidity when discussing female sexual response.
Well, what is commonly meant by the term frigidity?
Well, it is most often applied to women who are unable to have orgasm during sexual intercourse, and it is also applied to women who do not desire sexual intercourse. So there's a wide range of variance in the use of this one word.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, to get back to my original question, what percentage of this is physiological and what is psychological?
Well, it is extremely rare that there is a physiological or physical reason for frigidity, although people can suffer from painful intercourse and therefore not desire sexual relations and be falsely classified as being frigid, although in reality they may just have a minor gynecological problem. such as an overly tight vagina, or such as an inflammation in the vagina, which can cause pain with intercourse. And none of these women in that situation are actually frigid.
Mm-hmm. And I take it you would agree with this?
Yeah.
How much importance do you attach to the orgasm itself? What could a woman expect in terms of sexual experience from an orgasm?
This search for the orgasm is what bothers many women today. I would estimate that about 50% of the patients that I see are troubled by the difficulties that they have in attaining orgasm during sexual intercourse. Women have been inhibited throughout their developing years by well-meaning mothers, by a well-meaning community and society to protect them from the so-called evils of sex. And then one day they are thrown into bed with a man and they're expected to perform after having been conditioned to the evils of sex. And consequently, many women, without any surprise, have difficulty functioning on a total released level, which finally would end up in orgasm.
So where does the trouble start?
Well, why don't we hear
Dr.
from
Roblyn?
No, I would just drew breath because I was thinking that for the woman, probably the psyche is the critical factor. And it's for the woman the facilitation or the inhibition that goes on up there in the mind that says, no, stop, or yes, yes, go ahead. And this is the critical, the all-important critical factor, I think, in terms of the female.
Mm-hmm. What variables are here? I mean, what are some of the variables in relationship to orgasm? Does age, does educational level, does the length of time a person has been married have anything to do with the orgasm?
In terms of socioeconomic strata, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of female age, well, in terms of the aging woman,
No,
or rather,
not exactly in
well,
terms of the...
there have been theoretical considerations that a woman with increasing after childbirth parity, that the Paris woman is capable of greater sexual responsivity. Now, this is disputable, but it is still one of the expressions of sexual information. And this is on a physiological basis, and I think Dr. Copley really would have to speak to this point as an OB-GYN.
Well, I disagree to some extent. I feel that women who have a sexual problem or feel they have a sexual problem have this persist after childbirth as well as whether it is present before childbirth or not. Childbirth plays some role in the actual physical contact between man and woman, but it doesn't play much of a role in the psychological
Not in the psyche.
play between people. And as to whether or not a woman gets fully aroused and is capable of achieving orgasm, I don't think that changes very much with childbirth. She may have, on occasion, more difficulty achieving orgasm during intercourse for some minor physical factors, but she doesn't essentially become non-orgasmic because of childbirth.
Now, postpartum
find
depression is one thing, and postpartum obstetrical damage is another.
Is there any difference in terms of fulfillment regarding the two types of orgasm, the clitoral orgasm versus the vaginal?
Yes, this is often discussed. I don't believe that there is a difference in terms of the sexual satisfaction that a person receives from orgasm as to whether or not it's obtained during intercourse or with masturbation or with manipulation or genital contact. The orgasm provides some physical and emotional release to the woman, and especially a sense of accomplishment, since it becomes this important goal to achieve by our goal-oriented society. Every woman at this point, after reading The Sensuous Woman or reading Rubin's book on everything you ever wanted to know about sex, every woman attempts now to achieve an orgasm and is bitterly frustrated and disappointed when she does not achieve an orgasm and tends to put herself down in this situation.
Well, do you think these books are to blame then, perhaps, for deceiving the bulk of women today in this area? Do you think they have over-romanticized and over-glamorized sex, perhaps?
Well, I think anything that brings sex into the household as a more common, accepted idea is helpful rather than hurting. And I think that once the initial shock is overcome in the houses of some people who feel that sex is maybe a dirty or a forbidden or a hidden thing, I think once sex takes its normal happy, friendly, perspective, feelings into the house as to what it really should be to maintain a good sexual relationship from childhood on, I think everybody will benefit and be much happier. The child has to grow up in an attitude of feeling that sex is good, healthy, that it offers release, whether it be masturbation or touch, or finally ending up in intercourse, successful in releasing certain feelings and making someone feel that they are good and happy with the person that they're with.
Can we get into causes now, contributory factors that you feel might be responsible for upsetting the balance, the sexual balance? Dr. Seidenberg, do you feel that early training, parental attitudes, and so on play a large part in this?
Well, I think for one thing, perhaps the discussion we're having today contributes to the problem that we're even discussing. I don't say that in any way of trying to downgrade what we're doing or the motives of the program, but as I've written at times, that there really aren't any sexual problems. And by focusing so much as we have on the sexual problems and the sexual organs, I think we forget the real issue, which is the problem between the sexes. And this is the ongoing issue that manifests itself in many ways, and it manifests itself in bed, it manifests itself physically and physiologically in many other ways. And I think the facts of life that children have not been taught is the way little girls are brought up and little boys are brought up, not necessarily as pertains to intercourse or the sensual aspects, but their fate in life, the roles they have to play, the dignity that they have in growing up, the opportunities they have. And this, of course, as we're now beginning to find out, is something that's always been hidden. The vast difference in the opportunities, say, for a girl in growing up and for a boy in growing up. And this ultimately goes into the relationship between the two and will manifest itself in sexual ways, as it must.
Why is there such a discrepancy between the time a woman reaches her peak years of sexual attainment and the time a boy reaches his peak years of sexual attainment?
Well, you see, sex traditionally and historically has been no friend of girls and women. It's been their enemy because the social consequences of a girl's sexual activity can be disastrous. For a boy, it can only add to his heroic stature. So even there you see, in a contemporary way, in his own history, sex has different consequences. But historically, if you look at the Inquisition, for example, for 800 years women were burnt at the stakes. Men burnt their wives and sisters and daughters at the stake, principally for sexual reasons, because it was felt, and you can see this in there's a little handbook of how to prosecute witches. And the principal reason these people were called witches and burned at the stake was that they somehow took the potency away from some man in the village. And these witches had to be, these people, here I call them witches automatically, part of sexism. You see.
Do you think this battle is going on still today?
Of course, the Inquisition doesn't suddenly die.
Do you think women's changing attitudes towards sex, the fact that they expect a lot more than they did, say, 25 years ago, has placed an extra burden on the man?
No, not at all. It may equalize a little bit, but as I said before, I think this is this so-called sexual revolution, sexual awareness, although I certainly think it's in the right direction, I think it is misplaced. I think that far more emphasis should be placed on seeing that little girls, for example, are taught that they can be physicians and not necessarily just nurses or the traditional occupations that they're given. This is the vital part. If these things are straightened out, I think the things in the bedroom will come automatically. You deal with sexism, and sex will take care of itself.
Dr. Roblyn.
Well, I just, in response to your initial question, which was why do women reach their peak of sexual gratification at a later age than men? It's a matter of all the philosophies expressed by Dr. Seidenberg, but indeed, it's a matter of their not having discovered themselves as human sexual beings, not having recognized their own bodies to participate in this, and not having had any practice, which the male is expected to have in the early development of his life.
You know, I heard a quote the other day from a rather radical feminist who said that female sexual dysfunction is a load of rot, or words to that effect, and the fault is really with the man. It's a question of male incompetence. What do you think of that? What would be your reaction to that observation?
Well, again, I think sex is not a communication. Sex is an expression of a communication. And to me, if there hasn't been a communication between the two, then the chances of having great sexual gratification lessens. I don't think it's necessarily the function of the male. At times, a woman can bring her hang-ups with her as a result, as residuals of her psychosexual development. But for the most part, there have been management of sexual problems that entail training men and women how to, which of course doesn't change psychic enhancement, but certainly can manage to some extent.
Don't you think we're seeing more 20-year-old young women who are functioning at a peak of sexual activity and enjoying it readily and could be said to be at their sexual peak and have reached it earlier now because some of them have gone through a more enlightened phase during their growing up, maybe through more enlightened parents or maybe through more enlightened society contacts? It's difficult to say.
I don't know if we have any data, but I'm sure that this is the expectation for the very next generation anyway. For your children and my grandchildren. Let's put it that way.
What do you think of the traditional Freudian psychoanalytical interpretations of this problem?
Well, I think the whole problem about the discussion about variations in female sexual responsivity, which just packs our medical and psychiatric journals, and as I said, is infiltrated into even the women's magazines that you're supposed to leave on the coffee table, McCall's and Good Housekeeping. I think all of this and a lot of the myths and fallacies can be laid right to the door of Freud, who did some marvelous things and was tremendous genius, gave us great insights into the way man functions, but presented us with a psychological concept of a female that just turns me off totally. Now, for Freud, his concept of a female was an undeveloped, poorly developed specimen of a male. Somebody who was going to be permanently envious because her body build wasn't the same as the male. Someone who would have to be passive, submissive, and masochistic in a sexual relationship. And then Freud took one big step and said, all this, yea, all this is biologically ordained by virtue of the fact that the woman doesn't have a male sexual apparatus. And from there on, we were caught in this bind.
Listen, let me ask you something.
Re-caught in this bind because it's existed before. So.
I'd like to add something.
Yes.
Much of what Gloria says is true, and it can't be denied, but I'd like to add that much of what the modern-day sexologists are saying is no different than some of the bad parts of Freud, and so that...
Which modern-day sexologists?
And which bad parts of Freud?
Well, I think the mechanistic approaches that we have seen, the 10-day cures of sexual difficulties, the explanations of sexual relations purely on the physical mechanics are very simplistic and really nonsense to my mind. And so that if you replace the bad in Freud with the bad of what is going on now, you're not ahead. I think the advances in this field will come not from physicians and not from sexologists. It'll come from women themselves in their own consciousness-raising groups, in their own liberation groups, where they will be able to work these things out by themselves and not with the imposition of experts who are going to tell them whether they should have clitoral orgasms or vaginal orgasms.
All right, but let's get down to practicalities. A woman has this problem. What does she do? Where does she go first? Does she go to you? Does she go to a gynecologist? I think
one of the biggest problems we find is that many physicians today are not taking a sexual history, are not interested in the woman from a sexual point of view. Most physicians are interested in the woman from her physical aspects in terms of what disease she might have, and really are not ready yet to probe the inner workings of the sexual activities and mind of the female.
So what do you do when a woman comes to you with this problem?
Well, I feel that today many obstetrician gynecologists are beginning to recognize the importance of sexual behavior so that the woman who's being interviewed can at least feel that she has somebody to talk to and be reassured that her problems are not so great, or they're not really problems, that she's basically normal. So in order to encourage this...
Do you interview her along with her husband, or do you interview her alone?
I do, as a matter of course, interview a patient alone without her husband, although I do encourage patients to bring their husbands when they feel that the husbands are willing to come. I do find that quite frequently husbands are unwilling to come to discuss sexual problems. Many men who are married to women who are having difficulty having orgasm, even though they publicly blame their mate, deep down they feel that they are in some way inadequate and don't really wish to discuss it. The whole orientation towards achieving orgasm has become so compulsive that it actually subverts the cure.
But what do you do in practicality as far as treating this problem is concerned?
I feel the most important thing that you can do is encourage the woman to bring it out, to discuss it, to look at it, to see what is actually bothering her, to have her understand that if she's able to achieve an orgasm, that she's very normal, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with her if she's getting satisfaction. The only question is, why is she disturbed about this? Is she disturbed because she's not having orgasm during intercourse? And then make her aware that this is a very common occurrence, that many women do not achieve orgasm during intercourse, that it would be almost the equivalent of expecting a male to achieve orgasm from, say, stroking of the thigh, that for the woman to respond directly to having orgasm with intercourse requires a much more subtle stimulation, and not all women are uninhibited enough to do this.
Dr. Roblyn, how would your treatment approach differ?
Well, I would take issue, first of all, with Dr. Seidenberg, my equal time, that there's no question in my mind about the basic truths that he expressed. But I'm ready to look at any avenue of approach. And we have the traditional psychiatric approach. We have the concept of help through consciousness raising and sexism, but we have behavior therapy where you view sexual dysfunction as a symptom that can be handled and corrected. We have the Masters and Johnson approach, which is 2 weeks, not 10 days, Dr. Seidenberg.
Oh, my goodness.
2 whole weeks.
Line
And I think that it's very important that people realize that they clear and they screen these people, and they view this again as a presenting pattern that in itself does not represent a symptom of a disease or a disorder, but something that can be helped. And I guess I've been brainwashed, but I'm ready to accept, and I'm ready to try, and I'm ready to make referrals, and I'm ready to say that it's tremendously important that someone like Dr. Copley, who's an OB-GYN in this city, and the future generations of OB-GYNs, urologists, or whoever they are, be physicians knowledgeable about sexual matters, and be trained and taught, even by male chauvinistic pigs, so that they get a bias. I mean, if this is the implication. And even by women, so that they are equipped to understand.
What do you mean even by women? What do you mean even by women?
Well, I mean, it's in the same
accept women as
sense.
therapists?
But one of the points we made earlier was that women are also a product of male teachers. And how does this, contaminate me? Well, I'm not too contaminated, and
It's
I'm
exactly
hopeful.
for what you've said, for this reason, that I feel that we do more good by talking to the women we see in our practice and encouraging them not to inhibit their children in their growing up.
Oh, certainly.
I feel we can accomplish much more if we can train a woman to realize that masturbation or stimulation of the genitals in infancy or childhood is not a provocative act. It's not doing something to spite the parents. It has absolutely nothing to do with any deep-seated feeling of sexuality in an evil sense.
So you would
But
actually advocate
I would
this? Would you?
advocate entirely training the mother and the father to look at this in a very natural way, to encourage their children to see them in loving embraces, in treating sex as a natural and happy attitude, not necessarily exhibiting themselves purposely, but not exactly fighting it either. I feel that the more naturalism that can be brought into the family life regarding sex has a much more beneficial effect on our children than we can have in the office with any patient who already has problems.
I just am concerned about the physician, that he himself doesn't bring his hang-ups into his value judgments about what is the so-called expected normal, which really doesn't exist, or perversion, which is another label. And I think that it's critical that we have some kind of training.
I know how to get around that.
Now, good.
The woman shouldn't go to the physician at all.
Where should she go?
She should join a women's liberation group.
And indulge in consciousness-raising sessions.
Yeah, that's what you should do first.
Yes, yes. How important do you think is body image?
For what?
For a successful
The woman's
sexual
concept.
relationship.
In other words, feeling that her body is beautiful and attractive and so forth.
That's a lot of baloney. What she should feel is that she is important and attractive, and that's what they never want
Well,
women
that's what
to
I really
feel.
mean, you know.
Well, then say it.
I thought you'd get the implication.
No, these are the automatic things we say. When you say, you never say a man's body should be important. You say a woman should have an importance about her body image. You see the difference? A woman
We're
is
learning to
looked
think men
upon.
should have.
Well, you're
that too.
learning, but this is a man would be insulted if you said, well, aren't you worried about your body image, the importance of it? No, he's worried about the importance of himself, and this is how women should feel. Not that women should imitate men or be men. They should be people.
Yeah.
Both should be people.
Yes.
And this dichotomy of our language just leads us into these blind alleys.
I want to ask you all one question before we close. What would be your criteria for successfully maintaining a healthy sexual relationship over an extended period of time? Dr. Copley, would you like to start?
Well, it's a very broad topic. I feel that if you have a couple that enjoy each other and feel attracted to each other, there's a good basis for beginning long relationship. However, what happens to this relationship depends so much upon the attitudes that each has towards themselves, how strong they feel, so that they can perhaps weather the minor frustrations and storms that occur in every relationship. If they have a good self-image, they're much better able to feel love and give love when needed to the person who at other times the opposite person may have need for this. Obviously, any relationship encompasses giving and taking, and a person has to be strong to give.
Dr. Roblyn.
Well, I like what you said. I just sort of approached it from a different angle. I was thinking in terms of what they might expect, perhaps through the years of continuing sexual activity as only part in one phase of a communication in marriage. And one of the things is that they be aware that their happiness in their sexual relationship isn't dependent on, as we said before, on a prescribed kind of orgastic response, but it is dependent on understanding that any activity, any sexual activity that is non-obligatory, that isn't forced upon someone, and that is mutually gratifying, that they both enjoy, that doesn't harm them physically or psychologically, is part and parcel of lovemaking, and gives them release.
Right. Dr. Seidenberg.
The main thing is what happens outside the bedroom. That's the sine qua non of any type of happy relationship. Because if people treat each other with equality and justice in their other aspects of their living, the bedroom relationship will take care of itself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seidenberg, Dr. Roblyn, and Dr. Copley. Good night.